Today we're going to talk about cancer, specifically the 3 steps you can use to slow, stop, or even invert cancer progression. Cancer is commonly held to be a one-way street. You get diagnosed and then you're just hurtling towards the void. The disease then progresses, and although the progress can be slowed, it can't fully be halted. But science hasn't been standing still. We already have the tools to slow, stop, or even fully invert cancer progression and neutralize the danger that cancer poses to you. I know you may doubt this, but we actually have done this for a client who went from stage 4 to stage 1 cancer within 5 months. This means that when he first came to us, he had multiple metastases and less than 1.5 years to live. And at his last CT scan, the doctors found that the metastases which he had reverted to functional bone tissue. So no more metastases. And they give him now at least 5 years to live. So in this video, I'll show you exactly what we did to invert the progression of cancer for our client and give him back 3.5 years of life thus far. By the way, I'm Merlin and I'm one of the co-founders of Marchwood. We've got more than 120 citations from literature to back up our claims. Understanding and beating cancer is all we do every day. So let's get into it. I think we can all agree that we want to stop cancer from progressing. I also think it's important to know what exactly I mean when saying cancer progression. With cancer progression, I mean the slow transition from a benign neoplasm to a full-blown, aggressive, malignant, and metastatic cancer. Now, a neoplasm is just a fancy term for a bunch of cells within our body who grow abnormally. And these neoplasms are commonly divided into benign and malign neoplasms, where benign are not yet considered cancer and malign are then considered full-blown cancers. And all these cancers, wherever they fall on this spectrum, can only kill you when they progress, when they spread, and when they grow, and by thus displacing healthy tissue. So, how do we stop cancer from outcompeting and replacing healthy tissue and cells? If we want to stop this, the most important thing we need to do is to hamper with or curb the overproduction of NADPH. NADPH is a compound widely used in cell metabolism, and amongst other things, it directly supports the progression and survival of cancer cells. To understand how it does this, we need to take a step back and zoom out before we get back to NADPH. Now, our cells are comprised of a cell membrane. Then inside this cell membrane is the cytosol, which contains the nucleus and the mitochondria. Now, this is a stark simplification, but it suffices for our purposes. Healthy mitochondria have the ability to initiate apoptosis. Now, apoptosis is just a fancy term for cell suicide. Normally, mitochondria will initiate apoptosis or cell suicide in cells that are deemed to be defective or too dangerous for our body to be left alive. So, why aren't cancer cells killed? They are both defective and dangerous to our body. Well, this is because cancer cells have dysfunctional mitochondria, and these dysfunctional mitochondria cannot initiate apoptosis, which would normally limit cancer cell survival and growth. This means that if we can increase and improve the ability of mitochondria to initiate apoptosis, we can actually get cancer cells to commit suicide. And I think it's very, very obvious why we would want that. If a cancer cell commits suicide, it can't progress, it can't grow, and evidently it cannot kill you. Okay, but how do cancer cells maintain these dysfunctional mitochondria? Now, mitochondria initiate apoptosis through a molecule known as cytochrome C. Cytochrome C has 2 states, an oxidized and a reduced one, and only the oxidized state can be used for the initiation of apoptosis. And this is where the NADPH comes back in, which cancer cells so vigorously overproduce, because NADPH actively reduces cytochrome C and thus inhibits the ability of mitochondria to kill cancer cells. So to recap, cancer cells vigorously overproduce NADPH, which pushes cytochrome C towards its reduced state. And in this reduced state, cytochrome C cannot be used to initiate apoptosis. And this of course enables cancer cells to progress and grow despite being heavily dysfunctional and heavily damaged. So, how do we stop this overproduction of NADPH? One of the primary ways cancer cells will overproduce this NADPH is through glycolysis. And glycolysis is just the first step in sugar metabolism. Thus, if we can minimize the availability of sugar to cancer cells, we can inhibit the overproduction of NADPH. And to minimize the availability of sugar, we must maintain a stable and non-elevated blood sugar level. As our blood sugar level is elevated by sugar and carbs in our diet, we should be eliminating both of these. You will find carbohydrates and sugars in such things as non-cheese dairy, as fruits, as starchy vegetable, as grains and bread, but also as sweets of course, as desserts, as sodas, as beer and as wine. Eliminating these from the diet is a good first step in reducing the overproduction of NADPH by cancer cells. But there is more we can do. To understand what more we can do, I want to zoom out again. If we look at an active and growing tumor, i.e. the type of cancer which can kill you, we see that it exhibits the Warburg effect. The Warburg effect is just a fancy name for something all growing tumors do, because all tumors upregulate lactic acid fermentation, which is usually reserved to context where oxygen is not available. Now, lactic acid fermentation is what cancer cells actually do with the sugar we restricted in the first half of this video. And cancer cells rely on this lactic acid fermentation to fuel their rapid growth, whether oxygen is available or not. And this overuse of lactic acid fermentation has multiple negative effects. Of course, the first one of these negative effects you already know. It's the direct overproduction of NADPH, which inhibits cell suicide of cancer cells. Now, another negative side effect is that the waste product from lactic acid fermentation, which is lactic acid, is, as the name implies, acidic. And cells normally abhor acidity. Unless cells are specialized for it, if the environment becomes too acidic, these cells will die. And that's perfectly normal. But cancer cells are anything but normal. And over time, as cancer cells acidify their environment, they will gain adaptations to better survive and even thrive in this acidic environment. Okay, so the acidity is bad because it kills healthy cells and cancer cells will adapt to thrive in it. But it gets worse. The acidity of the immediate environment of the tumor will actually stimulate signaling pathways in the cancer cells. And some of these signaling pathways lead to a shift in metabolism, which further improves the overproduction of NADPH. And if we remember that NADPH is precisely the molecule which cancer cells use to evade cell suicide and survive, we can understand why this acidity of the immediate environment of the tumor is bad. To recapitulate, the acidity of the immediate tumor environment kills healthy cells, and the cancer cells adapt to thrive in this acidity, so we make more space for cancer cells to thrive in an environment which they like, and then these cancer cells use the acidity to upregulate even further their production of NADPH, which in turn supports cancer cell survival and growth. But surely it cannot get worse, right? Besides shifting the metabolism of a cancer cell to produce even more NADPH, the acidic environment also directly drives the epithelial mesenchymal transition. And this transition is the key step in cancer progression from a localized tumor to an aggressive and metastatic cancer. i.e., without this epithelial mesenchymal transition, a cancer cannot progress from stage 1 to stage 2 and beyond. So to recapitulate, cancer cells overproduce lactic acid, which acidifies their environment. And this acidification kills normal cells, but cancer cells adapt to survive and even thrive in this acidity. And the acidity directly stimulates a shift in metabolism to produce even more NADPH, which reduces cancer cell suicide rate or cancer cell death rate. And as if that wasn't bad enough, the acidity directly drives the transition from a localized tumor to an aggressive metastatic cancer. I think it's now very obvious why we would want this acidity to be gone. I think it's now very obvious why we want this acidity to be gone. But how do we do it? As you may have correctly guessed, lowering the production of lactic acid is a very good first step in this. Now, to lower the production of lactic acid, we just need to minimize the fuel cancer cells ferment into lactic acid, which of course is sugar. And to do that, we just do what we already did in the first half of the video, which is to abstain from sugars and carbohydrates. But there's more we can do. We can directly neutralize the acidity that cancer cells cause via the production of lactic acid. And this neutralization of acidity is called alkalization therapy. And combining alkalization therapy with chemotherapy has been shown in clinical trials to improve full remission rates from 0 to 42% and to drastically improve the lifespan of the average patient. Now, if you want more on this, we've dedicated an entire section of our Mosaic Method guide to precisely this topic. And you can get the guide for free at marchworth.com/mosaic. Now, how do we ourselves perform this alkalization therapy? Well, alkalization therapy can be done either pharmaceutically, which of course isn't an option, or by supplementing sodium bicarbonate or trisodium citrate. Now, sodium bicarbonate is just simple baking soda, and trisodium citrate is used as a flavoring agent and as a melting salt in sodas and cheeses respectively. Now, the daily amount of sodium bicarbonate or trisodium citrate which we need to use to have successful alkalization therapy varies by age, by person, by lifestyle and by diet. But we do have some proxies we can use to ascertain and to assure that we are in successful alkalization. If I wanted to start today with alkalization, I'd start with 1 gram of sodium bicarbonate or baking soda in the morning and in the evening. Then I would order food grade trisodium citrate because it just tastes better than baking soda. And I would dissolve the baking soda or the trisodium citrate, whatever you use, in sparkling water because the sparkling water takes some of the soapy taste out of both compounds. And then I would order pH strips because we need to ascertain whether we have a urinary pH of 7 or above. And if we have a urinary pH of 7 or above, we have successful alkalization. And if we have a urinary pH below 7, we know that we should probably increase our dosage of sodium bicarbonate or trisodium citrate because we're not yet in successful alkalization. And if you want this all in writing, again, I recommend to you the Mosaic Method guide, which you can get for free at marchworth.com/mosaic, and which goes over how cancer works, which interventions work against cancer, and how you can implement them into your everyday life. Okay, let's recapitulate what we've achieved thus far. We now know that NADPH overproduction enables cancer cells to escape cell suicide. We know that NADPH overproduction is directly enabled by the fermentation of sugar into lactic acid. We know that lactic acid from this fermentation process acidifies the environment of the tumor. We know that this acidity promotes further overproduction of NADPH and directly drives the progression of cancer. And we know that this progression is precisely what enables cancers to metastasize, ergo, to spread throughout your body. And practically, we learned how we can slow or even reverse these processes by lowering the overproduction of NADPH, which we can do by abstaining from carbs and alkalizing the environment of the tumor. And of course, we know that we can alkalize the environment of the tumor by starting alkalization therapy, which we also went over how to start from scratch. If you know someone who would benefit from this, please do share the video with them. And if you've made it thus far, you might be exactly who we're looking to coach. So if you want to try to increase your life expectancy like others before you, you can get in touch with us at marchworth.com/outlive or in the description below. With that all, I thank you very much for your time and for your trust. May God truly bless you with health and healing, whatever you do in life. God bless.